cracked cylinder head would not have got past the director Stanley Kubrick, a man of meticulous, sometimes maddening exactitude. Among the exhibits in a show devoted to his work at the Design Museum in London is a sheet of writing paper which Kubrick has clearly subjected to pre-purchase testing. "This is how it types" is typed on it, and just below that, in red handwriting, "This is how it takes ink." He was equally punctilious about how he stored his own archives, commissioning a bespoke cardboard box from the manufacturer, because none of the available ones would do. Most of what's on show here is drawn from those archives, which reveal how he prepared to make films such as 2001 A Space Odyssey, Full Metal Jacket, Doctor Strangelove and many others, with careful storyboarding and exhaustive research into locations and source material. Despite his huge reputation as a filmmaker, he only ever won one Oscar for visual effects on 2001. That Oscar is here, but also props that will be far more evocative for fans of his films, from the model spacecraft that featured in that film to the helmet worn by Matthew Modine in Full Metal Jacket. Amber Butchart, this is a design show because there isn't a detail in a Kubrick frame that he hasn't thought about and vetted and signed off. What did you think of it?
I really enjoyed it, and the Design Museum, for that reason, I thought was the absolutely perfect setting for it. All elements of production design were considered, which I really appreciated, especially, of course, I especially appreciated the costume design. This is an area that sometimes gets left out of discussions about film production, so it was great to see that. I thought, actually, Milena Canonero, who worked on A Clockwork Orange, she worked on The Shining, she worked on Barry Lyndon. I thought she won an Oscar for Barry Lyndon.
Oh, did she? I may have got that wrong. Yeah.
I think so, yeah.
I think that was his only Oscar. That was Kubrick's only Oscar, yeah.
But seeing her work, seeing her highlighted as one of the sort of key players in this story, seeing the costume sketches by Hardy Amies was just
That's
magical.
for 2001. He's casting his eye into the future, isn't he?
Yeah, including a lady scientist, which was interesting.
That wag.
Bob Smith.
Well, I think it is a great exhibition, but I agree with what you're saying, but I think it's a little intellectually unambitious to think about Kubrick just in those terms, because really each of those films is a colossal societal bombshell, isn't it? And you're taken round these films, and they were talking about in the presentation, we were told about how he made every film was different. Well, he made every film different because he wanted to punch another part of society, and in a way those kind of Ballard and William Golding and Anthony Burgess and Kubrick, they're huge intellectual forces trying to say something powerful, and the museum weirdly doesn't feel that it has the guts to say that, and it ought to, really, because the exhibition says it and Kubrick says it.
Yeah. Kerry Shale.
Well, I think just by showing huge excerpts of each film, it actually shows that, because I really enjoyed and you get really close to the films as well, even closer than you could in the cinema. The first bit that I saw was from Paths of Glory, and I sat about.
It's his film about the First World War.
The First World War, and I've seen it a few times, but once on the big screen and once on television. But this was like an immersive experience. You saw just how brilliant it was when you're I was literally 2 feet away from it. There's an execution scene like no execution scene they've ever made. There's an amazing scene in the trenches. In the trenches scene, which is this tracking shot pre-Steadicam, and every detail again you can see when you're sitting there, including the extra with the pipe. There's probably about 100 extras in it, but there's one guy smoking a pipe, and it's you think Kubrick chose that pipe, and he probably told him the angle that the pipe was supposed to be at.
He probably had 20 pipes bought to him before selecting
exactly. Well, he was referred to in one of the documentaries, because there's a lot of other documentaries you can see. There's a 30-minute documentary just about the music. But he was referred to in the documentary about 2001 as having a bizarre and incisive imagination. And I think that's pretty close.
I wonder what you felt it says about him as a director of actors. There's a little moment from video showing the shooting of Full Metal Jacket, and he turns to Matthew Modine just before they're about to make the camera go live, and he says, "Do something brilliant." I thought, that's not enormously helpful.
I think they must have had a lot of fun, all the Peter Sellers comes off very well in this exhibition. You know, all the Doctor Strangelove stuff. They must have had a lot of fun shooting those scenes, and I think he worked really well with actors.
I know a few people who've worked with him, and it was 7 circles of hell, because he would do hundreds of takes.
He's bullying.
And you lose the fun. Well, the thing
woman
is,
in The Shining,
yeah, well,
isn't
he bullied Shelley Duvall in The Shining famously, but after you've done literally 100 takes. When we're off the air, maybe I'll tell you about the time that I was directed by Kubrick. No, I did the trailers for one of the films, and he didn't give me any direction. That's the thing, is he keeps you there until you want to die, and that's when he thinks you'll give him a good performance.
Yeah. I mean, to his credit, one of the exhibits here is a rather touching letter from Sue Lyon, who played Lolita. And she writes, she's obviously given up acting, she's happily married, and she writes a very tender letter to him saying, I just wanted to let you know how I was, and it'd be lovely if you got in touch. So he didn't obviously
but Malcolm
completely
McDowell
traumatise her.
Malcolm McDowell is on record as saying, I thought me and Stanley had this thing. We lived together really for a year and a half or whatever it was. And when I left that last day, he was never in touch, and
yes,
having almost destroyed my vision as well with the scratched corneas.
I think
so it wasn't all fun and games.
It wasn't just the actors as well. My grandfather actually worked in the sound department at Elstree at MGM British, and walked out during the making of 2001 because he could not deal with the idiosyncrasies of Kubrick's direction anymore. And that element of, the sort of set design, the people making all of this happen, is what the museum really brings to life. The exhibition really brings to life so well. It's not necessarily just about the actors.
I thought it was nice.
About the intellectual content, but it's about how this work of art gets made.
I just thought it was a pretty amazing exhibition, really. Okay. But I do think they ought to perhaps they will do this in the programming, make more of the impact of that generation of people who had kind of come out of the war and they just wanted to torture smug society, really. And I think it was wonderful.
You took it in with you, so maybe other visitors will too.
Yeah.
Anyway. The Stanley Kubrick exhibition runs at the Design Museum in London until the 15th of September. You can hear an interview with its curator and with Kubrick's stepdaughter, Katerina, in Front Row on Monday.